Welcome to Influential Women of Washington State. I'm Katie Hall. Money has always had an imperative role in decision making. Today, we'll be discussing with Kim Vu, a regional leader at Bank of America, about the power that comes with it.
Work doesn't happen, I think, effectively and in a really meaningful way if you just deliver money. I think, we're talking about money and we're talking about how you leverage a resource like money that really moves and transforms and can change communities. And I think it's really about what can we do with our partners and with our key influencers to really move the dial on key issues that are happening in our community versus this mindset of 2 or 4 that is really from a structural standpoint of when we look at institutional and structural racism and a lot of different things that are happening in our communities today. It's that mindset of 2 or 4 that I think prevents us from really getting to the solutions that we need to really create change. And it's changing that mindset and really thinking about how do we collaborate and work with, because this is really about rising all ships and everybody working together to empower everyone at the table. And so if it means that we need to get a bigger table, let's get a bigger table.
Yeah, absolutely, I like that. And so I hear transformation. And so when I think about transaction, I'm just thinking about going into a bank, depositing money in a bank, getting my receipt and leaving out. When you use the word transformation, it's so huge that you really can't put just a word on it. I feel like it's such a big thing that it's something that's different to everyone. So when you talk about transformation, what does that mean to Bank of America?
Yeah.
And then what does that mean to you?
Yeah, you use the example of walking into the bank and having this transaction occur between a deposit or a withdrawal, but I think for us, we're really trying to think about how do we connect with our customers and our clients and also our community partners around really delivering more than just those basic transactions, right? One of the programs that we have called Better Money Habits is really helping us sit down with our partners and our customers to say, how else can we help you as you walk through your life stages, whether it's buying your first home or your first car, or if you're looking at retirement or you're looking at savings for your family, how is it that we can actually start to have those conversations and really walk with you through life to really help you get set up for success. And that ranges, there's so many different things when you think about that. And so all of our frontline staff are well-versed in Better Money Habits. We use Better Money Habits as a way to go out into the community and volunteer with a lot of our partner organizations to deliver financial education to ensure that everybody feels equipped to be able to navigate through their personal finances.
Very nice. And so it sounds like you're hitting communities of individuals, because you said customers,
Yep.
and you're also meeting communities at a large.
Yes.
Now, one of the things I love about Bank of America, after meeting you a few years ago, was the fact of your impact with the young people, with high school students. Talk to us a little bit about your high school programs.
Yeah, so we work quite a bit with youth, and one, because I think they are our future, and I think it's really important to be able to invest in the power of our future leaders, and we do that in a couple of different ways. One of the ways that we do that is through our Student Leaders Program. The program's been around for over 14 years, and every year, every summer, we select 5 high school juniors and seniors, and we give them a paid 8-week summer internship. But interestingly enough, the paid internship isn't actually with us. It's actually to go and work with our community partners and community nonprofit organizations so that they can learn about what it really means to be a community leader and go in and work with the executive director, work with the program officer, the fund development team, meet the board, and really understand the inner workings of how a nonprofit organization works and what it means to be a leader in the community. And whether they decide to take that experience and work in business and apply that ethos that they learn from nonprofits in their space, or if they decide that they're going to go and be a community builder and become a nonprofit leader after college. We really just want to be able to plant that seed and really invest and encourage them to really think about the bigger picture that you can do well by doing good.
I understand that in banking, and I worked in banks before too, all throughout college actually, and in banking, in certain roles in banking, it's been male dominated for years. So talk to us about being a leader that started in banking and then it emerged up to a very high level of leadership. Like, what is that like to be that type of leader in an industry that was male dominated for so long?
Yeah, when I first started out after college, I started out in wealth management, private bank, and it was, yeah, and it was a very, I think, it was such a great experience being able to start out, early in my career, learning about the business, being able to manage a balance sheet and manage a team and really build out a team, because the private wealth management program that I led actually didn't exist within the financial institution that I had worked for. So really being able to build a business line from the ground up was an incredible experience. It did not come without challenges. I think the challenges came in that when having to look outside of my organization and try to figure out those, like, how do we build this program and what do we need to do? A lot of it meant that I needed to go into the larger industry of wealth management, private bank, and seek out the resources that I needed to really learn. But in that process, it was very, a lot of times felt very isolating, because I'd walk into a room and, at the time I was in my early mid-20s, and I tended to always be the only female, easily the youngest person in the room, and generally the only person of color in the room. And so I always felt like I had to walk into a room and qualify myself, in a way that I think most guys particularly don't have to do when they walk into a room. I mean, even 20 years later, a lot's changed since then. I think the industry has evolved quite significantly, but still, I think just for Kim, as I walk in, we joked about that I look young, right? Yeah. And I think it's a challenge, right? I walk into a room even today, even with 20 years under my belt, and I still have to qualify myself. To be able to say to folks like, hey, actually, I've been in the industry for a long time. I know what I'm talking about. Right. And I didn't just graduate.
That's a good point. So, like, what does that do to, women in, like I said, like a field like yours? Like, what does that do to them, like, to, like, more of their self-esteem, or what does that do to their confidence when they're sitting at the board table, or they're sitting at in these very important meetings, and they have to come in with that extra feeling they have to qualify themselves before even answering a question or before even giving a recommendation?
Sure, yeah. I think it comes down to, I credit coming from a family who, are immigrants and refugees, and we fought to find our space and our place in this country. And one of the things that I really learned from my parents, and specifically my dad, was he was a fighter pilot, and so one of his, for me, the thing that I really appreciate about him is he always said, like, a fighter never says no. And so he built in me this instinct of being really really just determined, and not backing down, and being really determined to be able to push through when I'm put in situations where maybe I'm not the typical face or person in the room, to sit there, because I know that I worked hard to get there, right? Absolutely. And because if I'm the first person there, guess what that means? That actually means there will be more people who look like me because of it. So even though it feels really uncomfortable to be in the room, I tell myself I need to stay in the room, right? And stay in the room and to speak up, and to be able to make sure that as I'm coming through the ranks, that I'm leaving the door open behind me. And also, I think speaking up more about all the personal experiences that I've had, I think helps identify who those allies are in the room too, because I think the industry didn't change because we didn't have the conversations. That we had the conversations. We identified who the allies were. We had, a lot of folks had to have those conversations about this is not the type of environment or workplace that we want. How do we create a workplace that feels really inclusive and also brings everybody along? And so I think coming to the bank has been really incredibly refreshing, and also really empowering to come to an organization that is truly committed. When they say we're committed to diversity and inclusion, within the workplace and also out, in the community, that's the part that I feel really, really proud to be able to work for an organization that does that, because the investment is there. We're having those conversations, we're building out the programs, we're building leadership tracks. There's lots of different elements that are being built in to ensure that, women are in positions of leadership making really important decisions within the organizations that are impacting, employees, impacting our communities, impacting our customers and our clients. We didn't have a workforce of over 50% women by accident. We don't have, those are all
really?
intentional things.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yes.
Yes.
So the organization's over 50% women in the workforce. We're over 40% of women in the management teams.
And
then
that's important.
Yes,
Because a lot of times you'll hear
absolutely.
organizations, and they're like, we're like
Yeah.
80% women. We're like, okay, let's talk about those roles.
Yeah.
What roles are there?
Yeah,
in?
exactly.
And so that's very important.
And also where I think the other part that we're really leading way ahead is actually at the board of directors level.
Let's talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that, because there's been a lot of research, not even it's a lot of talk, and it's
Yeah.
obvious about women sitting on boards of directors. And we had a really excellent one a few days ago
Yeah.
that talked about being on a board of directors and being a chair of it.
Yep.
So talk a little bit about what is Bank of America doing to
Yeah.
empower more women
Yep.
to want to be on board of directors.
Yeah.
Not only want to be on it, but being able to give them the tools to be successful.
Sure. So I think before I think it's always important before you talk about it, you also need to be modeling it, and we're definitely modeling it. Our board of directors has over 30% women, which is double the Fortune 500 average, as well as double the financial services average. And so we're way ahead, and that doesn't mean that we're going to stop. It's not like we said 30%, we're done.
We're good.
Our executive team is really committed to saying, hey, how do we continue to increase these numbers and ensure that there's a pipeline and a track for more and more women and people of color, to ascend those ranks. What we're doing to help the larger conversation in the larger community here in Seattle, we work with an organization called the Board List, and the Board List is focused on getting more women on corporate boards. And so we partner with them to provide programming for women who are seasoned in their careers. They're really ready to step into those roles. They've done the slew of nonprofit or boards. They've done the slew of I think civic boards and commissions. But really, how do you get women on corporate boards? And so we're working very closely with them to be able to provide the programming and creating the access for women who are more senior in their careers to start to think about how to start creating those conversations and positioning them to be asked to join boards. And and a lot of it is really for women to say, I want to be on a corporate board.
Absolutely. So you hit on so many things there. We could talk forever.
Yeah.
Male allyship. So
Yeah.
I heard you used the word ally, and it sounds like to me that your father was one of your first male allies.
Yes.
Now, was he in the military? Because you said
He was. So my dad, before my parents immigrated here, he was a fighter pilot in the South Vietnamese Air Force. And so he, because of his, the role that he played within the war, he had to escape Vietnam. Otherwise, he would have ended up in a re-education camp. And so when my dad immigrated here and then met my mom, we started the family in Texas, and that's kind of where a lot of things started for us. And spending time with my parents early on and watching them struggle to build a family and build community really that's the impression that it's left on me when I think about, in my position now, how do I help build community and build that strength for so many families who struggle just like my family did, and how do we make sure that, that lens I take with me always through all of my work, to make sure that so when I go back and think about that 2 and 4 versus with,
that makes sense.
That's really where it comes from is from that experience of growing up,
So it's your upbringing.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to be in an organization that really aligns with your character and,
Yeah.
who you are.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so when you hear the terminology male allyship, 'cause we talk quite a bit about the importance of women
Yeah.
being at the table, being on board of directors, having that representation.
Yep.
But when you think about the word male allyship, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, male allyship is really about men who are, willing to step up and say, you know what, like, I want to hear about your experience. I want to know what's going on. How do I use my privilege to move more women forward? How do we pull more seats to the table? And I think that's really, we talk about sponsorship a lot, mentorship and sponsorship.
Yes.
I think the biggest change maker that men can make in this conversation is really looking at that role of sponsorship, because sponsorship, those are the people who open doors, who can elevate people to other opportunities. And so I think male allies, to better understand the struggles that have occurred, how do we break down some of those barriers, and actually move women into those positions and into those roles. And also, I think being really visible, right? And talking about those experiences of here's how I did it, so that other guys can hear it, right? I think that's the other challenge too, is I think there's a lot of men who say, I want to do it, I don't know how to do it. And they may come to a woman and say, how do I do this? And I think that's great to be able to start that conversation. And I also think it's really important that other guys are also saying, hey, here's how I did it to other guys, and here's what you can do too to really help, move and change the environment that we're in. And I think, we're starting to see that, right? I think the
Which
other
is nice. It's
yeah.
a nice place to be in.
Yeah, and I think, every single time, I think when we look back at all the different times in society where there's been huge upheaval, it's like the needle moves a little bit more, right? And so right now we're in that stage where
Oh yeah, it's moving.
it's moving. The
Yes.
line is going to move, and the line is moving, and that's where I'm really hopeful. I don't think we'll solve it.
No, not in our lifetime.
I
we're
don't
not.
think it's gonna.
Yeah, it's not.
I want to think that it will, and we continue to, like you and me and everyone else, we continue to invest in making sure that continues to, that line continues to move in terms of what the expectations are and how do we create a more inclusive society. But I think, I think that's where we have some opportunities to really, we're in the moment right now. Let's take advantage of it.
But that's the great part, what you
and
said
have that
earlier
conversation.
about making sure that we're leaving that door behind us open.
Yep.
And then that youth piece. So I think it all ties together. We may not see it in our
Absolutely.
lifetime.
Yeah.
But man, wouldn't it be great for these new babies to be able to see it in their
it's
lifetime?
about planting the seed,
Yes,
right? One of the
absolutely.
things that, as part of keeping that door open, is I think, we talked about sponsorship, but mentorship, right? And spending the time with young people to share your stories. One of my favorite, memories of spending time with students was actually at an elementary school. It was on a career day, and they were fourth graders, fifth graders, and I was telling them about my job, my career, and I said, if you do X, Y, and Z, you can go to college, and and you can do whatever it is that you want to do, right? If you set a goal. And I remember the little girl who was sitting right in front of me. She looked up with me with these huge eyes and said, "Even be the president of the United States." And I just looked at her and I said, yes, you can. And then the boy next to her said, girls can't be president of the United States. And I looked at him, and he's like, and said, actually, they can, right? And he was like, what, really? But the look on her face, I will never forget it, because it was she realized that it was a possibility. Yeah. And all the teachers that were standing in the back, they were all waving their arms and silently cheering, but it's things like that of being able to plant those seeds now, because one day, maybe not in our lifetime, but who knows, maybe she will be that next female president.
I would say to any young woman, follow your passion. If you can see it, think it, you can be it. and don't let anybody stand in your way.
Love that.
I would say be you and be in service to making the world a better place the best way that you can.
I love that.
Love yourself enough to give yourself permission to be the most powerful, engaging, dynamic leader that you can be.
What I hear from people that I speak with, women, is I try and help them silence that inner critic. So a lot of what they say to themselves is very negative. And so being aware of that, so kind of, silence the inner critic if you have that, or whatever that inner voice is telling you, that doubt, and stand in your own integrity and work collaboratively, amongst diverse teams. I think that's, when we can galvanize that, we're very powerful collectively.
I've been playing around with this idea in the creation of this show about women having a seat at the table, or us saying, screw that, let's create our own damn tables. So when you hear that, what comes to mind? Do we need both?
I would say it's a both.
All right.
I think you need multiple tools. It's a complicated, complex issue. So there isn't going to be one solution. That I think it needs to be multi-layered. And so I would say own tables, integrated tables, allyship is really critical.
Thank you.
I would say just get an entire furniture store. Don't just have a table. Have different levels of chairs around so the learning can happen across generations. Have different rooms on the side where you have more comfortable furniture for allies to sometimes go into when they need to regroup if they're not doing what they need to do. And also have that aisle right down the middle so that whenever someone has had enough and they need to step in for a time of respite to be able to refresh and then go back to the table, they can do that.
I like that vision of kind of an iterative process. I was going to say changing the menu, that however we set the table, whether we're joining a table that exists, that it's like authentically showing up and driving the conversation that's happening, regardless of who else is in the room, and being really powerful in doing that.
We can't look to the same solutions of the past to think that we're going to come up with the solutions of the future. I mean, there's that saying, like, what's the definition of crazy, right? Like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
And I think we're in a place right now where lots of transformation is happening. Transformation doesn't happen unless you start to try different things. I think it's one, finding a seat at the tables that exist. That might just mean like furniture change, right? Like we just need to get a bigger table, right? And add more seats to the table. And it's also, where have tables not existed for women, for people of color, for individuals from the LGBT community, for individuals who have disabilities? If the table doesn't exist, then let's create it. And I think also, how do you then also bring those tables together, the existing ones and the new ones? Because I think that's where the bridge building needs to happen, so that the power and the privilege that exists in the existing tables can be transferred and shared with the new tables that are being developed.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I wish I had my phone so I can tweet it. No, I like that for real. That was good. And so, Kim, you were one of 18 women that we selected. It's part of this TV series, part of
Yeah.
Bellevue College. We selected you to be an influential woman of Washington State. So when you hear that terminology and you think about the reason why we brought you on here, which is because money is power, what would you say to that future generation?
I would say influence is really about looking at, I think everybody has power. Everybody has power. I think we're born with a certain amount of power. It's how we apply it, right? And also, I think there's so much power in sharing stories and being really authentic and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. I think where status quo has existed for us is because there wasn't, everybody assumed everything was fine because there wasn't storytelling that was happening. An example I can give you of that is, I think when we think about Asian Americans, right? And you look at statistics that say, oh, Asian Americans are fine. They're doing really great. They're doing well in school. Financially, they're doing great. Monolithically as a whole, as a community as a whole, they're doing fine. We don't need to worry about them. They don't need resources. Maybe we should put quotas on them going to, Ivy League schools. That's been a conversation which, is challenging, right? And I think when you look at something like that, the importance of being able to tell the stories that exist even just within the Asian American community, because there's so many different cultures that exist within the Asian American community, where even if you just take a segment of the Asian American community, Southeast Asian, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community, if you actually break that down, you'll see that the numbers actually tell a much different story than what we're being told at a larger scale, which says actually there's lots of issues around health, there's lots of issues around income disparity, there's lots of issues around education and access and housing. And so when you look at it from that perspective, we're actually leaving behind a huge swath of our Asian American communities that aren't getting access to services and resources because we're choosing to look at the community as a whole versus really disaggregating the data and disaggregating the information to really be able to serve the community in the way that it really needs to be served. That will only happen if more of us tell our stories.
That's true.
And so being Vietnamese and being part of the Southeast Asian community, I think it is really important for me to be able to share my story and say, hey, you know what, actually, I'm a daughter of immigrant refugee parents, and this is what our experience was like, to build a family and build community here, and the struggles that created, but and what's possible. That it's not, just because those barriers are there doesn't mean that you can't succeed, but let's talk about it so we can actually figure out how to remove those barriers and make it easier for people to succeed here.
I like that. I like that very much. Is there anything else you want to tell to the future workforce?
Oh gosh, there's I think a lot of it has to do with, find work that you care about, whatever that might be, but bring your passion to your work, and you will be able to create all kinds of change. I don't think you have to actually work in community relations or work in social impact to create social change. You can create social change in so many different places, and it's just a matter of aligning your passion with your work. And so do what you love.
Thank you for joining us in our exploration of financial independence. We hope you're encouraged and inspired by Kim Vu and women like her leading our financial institutions across the nation. Join us for future episodes of Influential Women of Washington State to hear more discussions from extraordinary women. Until next time, I'm Katie Haw.